Well, guys, it's time. And I'd like to start by talking about the group presentations. This is the same PowerPoint that I put up about 10 days ago, 10 or 12 days ago. And I've been getting a lot of questions about it, and I thought, well, it's about time we move on this. And so we'll be doing the presentations on these 2 days, November 30th and December 2nd. And you guys all kind of know about this. Some of this may change because what I'm finding since we last talked, I've been trying to work on it. Making this doable with technology. So anyway, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But tonight, I want you guys to either tonight or tomorrow choose partners and choose subject matter. That's like a big thing we need to get out of the way. We have to do those two before we can do any of the rest of this stuff. And so choose partners. We're going to do partners of 2. You're going to work with a partner. Part of that has to do with the idea that getting 3 people together to work on something is much harder than getting 2 people to work on something. We'll have enough time to do as many presentations. What this means is that we'll probably have 9 groups, 9 presentations. And there'll be roughly 10 to 15 minutes each, and I think we can get them done. One of the drawbacks about doing 3 or more people as a group, how many of you ever did science labs where you got assigned a partner? Yeah, almost all of you probably have. And those are assigned. And I had kind of tossed around the idea of assigning partners, but I did this afternoon, and people wanted to choose their own partners. And so I'm okay with that. But the idea of having a third wheel on this, or a third leg, if you will, it just complicates matters. And so choose partners and choose subject matter. Now your subject matter is this: painting, sculpture, or architecture before the year 1300 CE, Common Era. And it doesn't matter to me what you choose as long as it's from the textbook. It does not have to be a star slide. It can be anything from the textbook. And I got to add too that the final chapters of volume 1, which is what we're working with, has chapters on South Asian art, China, Japan, and so on. Might be, if you're interested in that, you can run to the back of the book, or you can do something newer, or you can do something that we've covered in class. I don't care. But I do not want people to do duplicates. So the first group that comes in with their partner and the subject, I'll give you credit, you'll have that subject. So Brooke, Mia, if you guys were partners and you said you want to do Parthenon, you would get it. You're here, you told me this, boom, we're good. And I'll try to get as many of these done right now, as many as possible. We can do that on the chat if you like. You can start running them, your choices of partners and subject. Bottom line, cultural context, time, place, purpose of the work. I put purpose of the work deliberately because sometimes the purpose of the work is a monument to glorify a military victory, or it could be a temple to worship gods, or it may be a sculpture in honor of a leader, a thinker. It could be a sarcophagus. It could be a pyramid. It could be a lot of things. So instead of saying what it is, I want you to spell out the purpose. It could be strictly decorative too. We'll see some of that. And I want you to try to hit on as many of these as possible. Formal analysis that comes with the territory, legacy, how these things affect future generations. And so I'd like you to have your partners chosen before we come into class on Wednesday. I think we need to get that out of the way. I'm looking at 15 participants, 2 you guys are here. We'll have most everybody covered if everybody participates today. I said some of this might change. I said PowerPoint. That was my preferred software, but I don't have enough storage on my Canvas website to store all of your PowerPoint presentations, especially because I want you to annotate them. That is that I want you to do a voiceover. And that changes the file from a PPTX to an MP4, actually. It turns it into a movie. And it becomes very large. And I don't have the space. So lately I've been working on trying to find a place where you guys can share, work on the presentations, and a place that we can retrieve them and show them in class. I've been loading up, I bought some space on Google Docs, but I'm not sure I loaded a PowerPoint on there, and I'm not sure we can do what I'm asking you to do that way, because I think it's starting to look like, and I haven't figured out a way around it, that everything you put on Google turns it into a Google format. So instead of being PowerPoint, it becomes Slides. Google Slides, exactly. And if I can figure out that software and how you can put a narration on Google Slides, I'll be changing this to Google Slides. But like I say, I already loaded a PowerPoint on there. And it turned it into Google Slides. So we might be able to kind of cross-pollinate, perhaps. I don't know. And so I want you to get the topics and partners settled while I get the infrastructure set up for you to be able to do this. And so here is what I want you to do: a 10 to 15 minute presentation. And as a side note, as a Word doc or a Google Doc, a summary of the participation, as well as a transcript, which is really, the transcript is just what you narrate. And I think it's good, you'll find it helpful if you write down the narration before you try to do it cold. So that those things should be easy. Bibliography, I put peer-reviewed sources. Don't worry about that. I'll strike that. I've been trying to prepare you to this point to be able to do this. And so peer-reviewed sources are nice and they're reliable. But you can have other kinds of support. That's what we did on quiz 3. Bottom line is that you guys I just got interrupted here with chat. So anyway, I've been trying to get you prepared for this, and you don't always have to use peer-reviewed sources. I showed you guys how even in places like CNN, places like Time Magazine and stuff like that, they will in the text actually quote, according to the Journal of Archaeology, this was discovered in Russia or something. So I think you guys will be good with that. I'll want the bibliography or endnotes. It's just exactly the same thing that will be your last page of the presentation. And you don't have to narrate that. That's just pro forma. I did not cheat. I'm giving credit. And if you want to look it up, have at it. Submit materials on Canvas. That is going to change too. If we got to go to Google Docs, and I'm the administrator of this site, and you tell me you're done, I think I can take those Google Slides or whatever we have, and we're still trying to figure this out. I can put those on my YouTube, which will convert it to a YouTube video, which I can store on Canvas. When you do your presentation, like I said, when you do your presentation, I'll want to, on Zoom, have a little bit of question and answer. We can do that. We're all we can easily talk online that way. And so that's kind of the basis of it. But again, until I can find a good way that will allow us to get things done, the idea of submitting on Canvas and the fact that it'd be PowerPoint, give me a couple of days on And so I'm seeing on the chat room that you guys are still looking around. You can email me who your partners will be and what you choose to do, your subject matter. First come, first serve. And so there are going to be, I can tell, there will always be some duplicates. But I don't want you to do duplicates in the presentation. So the first one to get me the selection gets the selection. And so that's from last year. This was a sample of how I set it up. This computer support, this is largely falling on my shoulders. And again, there's that question and answer session that I would like. And so as we get closer, I'll have, presumably I'll have the technology lined up so that we can launch this project. Share screen, this one, share. Slideshow from the beginning. So you guys can see the Roman Empire?
Yep.
Okay. Roman Empire. Got a lot of stuff to talk about today, too. So bear with me. We talked last week about the Flavian's amphitheater, known as the Colosseum, right there in downtown Rome, as having all of this labyrinth of tunnels and rooms and cages and all kinds of stuff. Well, this is an aerial view, and you can see the remains, the ruins of all of that construction that would be under the floor, if you will, of the amphitheater. And this would have a roof, and depending on what event, it could have dirt and sand. As I said earlier, they could fill it up with water and hold mock naval battles in the Colosseum, and so on. And so this is what's left. I was trying to find in this picture the tourist ramp. They have, I know some people that have been there. I have not, by the way, but they have a ramp that kind of goes out into the middle of the stadium. It doesn't go very far, but it gets you a look down into this center area. And so it's under construction. They're trying to restore it as much as possible, and that may be why the tourists are not in this picture. Same thing goes with the Parthenon. A lot of tourists, but when they're doing the construction, can't go up there. Can see it from the outside. And so, Roman architecture. This next bit of slides has to do with the triumphal arch. And this is the Arch of Titus. Titus was a Roman emperor, and we know it was roughly about the year 81, after year 81. And you can see what it is and what it looks like. It's really kind of a basic post and lintel with an archway through the center. And it has inscriptions in Latin, so we know basically why this is here. And basically this is a memorial. This is something to honor Titus. And on the inside here, there will be friezes, that is low relief sculpture that will explain or illuminate Titus's accomplishments. And so I put the star on this one. This is from, some 20, 30 years later. The Arch of Trajan. And I put it here partly because it's a little bit more ornate. It's a little bit more developed. The idea of an arch, typically like any of these other forms, the early ones are much more simple. And as time goes on, they elaborate or improve on the idea. And so you can see all of the friezes, all of the decorative, this word Christian, I would call these angels here. You can see the winged gods and so on. And so anyway, this is the Arch of Trajan. And I got this slide to kind of back this up, because not all triumphal arches are the same. And this is a Bing search for images. You got a Paris arch, Leptis Magna, France arch, triumphal arch of Constantine, Roman arches, ancient Roman arches, Arc de Triomphe, which I believe is this one right here. And that's in Paris. And so anyway, Titus, Roman triumph, Rome arch, Barcelona arch. You see, Roman Empire extended way beyond the Italian peninsula. And so anyway, I don't exactly know what this is, but it looks similar to one that's in Berlin called the Brandenburg Gate. And, oops, I forgot. That was a screenshot. That wasn't a website I was going to click in and see. But at any rate, you see, these are all over the place. And this, I believe, too, this and this is Arc de Triomphe. And even though it's an ancient Roman idea, it's actually still functions. It has functioned in modern times, or at least within the last century. For instance, the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, France, when the Germans invaded and conquered France in 1940, German soldiers were lined up and they marched right down the Champs-Élysées. My French and Mass don't go very well. But they marched right through here in a triumphal march. And then 4 years later, when the Americans, the British, and the Free French forces liberated Paris, they in turn marched under the Arc de Triomphe. And for things like Bastille Day in Paris, they'll have military parades and they'll go through the Arc of Triomphe. It's still kind of a thing. And there will be these kind of arches in very strange places around. You know, you may see one like in a park or something. Very common, and it is a Roman invention. And this is the Arch of Constantine, and it's roughly 312, 315 Common Era. And this was created just prior to Constantine declaring Byzantium the center of the Roman Empire. He did that in 323 Common Era. But he was the emperor, and he was a great emperor. And in essence, this is one of the most elaborate and most substantial arches in all of Rome. You can see the scale, the people down here, and you can see all of the artwork, the inscriptions, all of the battle scenes, there was something going on too with all of this. Constantine was the first Christian emperor. If you guys know ancient history, you know that he believed that the Christian God saved him in battle. He saw a sign, he took it as Christianity being the true religion. He was converted. He was saved. And so anyway, before that time, Christianity was largely outlawed in Rome, and especially in the early days of Christianity, they would take the Christians and feed them to the lions in the Colosseum. That was sport back then. And so anyway, Constantine moved the center of Roman Empire to the east, and he declared Christianity the official religion of this new Rome. But there's a lot of things going on. I got some more artwork here that will help explain some of this too. Column of Trajan, dedicated in 112 Common Era, and we saw the Arch of Trajan. So Trajan was really quite an important and impressive emperor. And what you have on this column, and you see it doesn't have the height. It's actually quite large. You can see the 2-3-story building right here. So I'm not exactly sure. It's huge. And so anyway, around this column is a ongoing frieze. It spirals around the column, and it tells a story of all of Trajan's accomplishments. Bottom line, this is something that goes back to what even in Mesopotamia, we saw this kind of storytelling, low relief, continuous frieze. And it's kind of an interesting setup, if you will. And the people who looked at that at the time would have understood what that was about. And I say that because there are different ways of telling stories visually. And today we have motion pictures, and so it has its own set of rules. They change scenes. We understand that there is something called film time. You see the screen go dark for a second, and then it appears somewhere else. A year later, we understand this is not all compact, but it's part of the means of storytelling. This kind of continuous frieze was something the ancients would have understood. Another example, telling stories, graphic novels. For example, you got a box, you have a picture, you have a talk box, a thought box, some words, and you know that you look at this, absorb that information, and then move on to the box to the right. Then you go down, left to right, top to bottom. So anyway, just saying, this is an ancient storytelling convention. And one of the things that is kind of finally about the Romans and Hadrian's Villa specifically, the Romans just really started breaking all the rules about architecture. So we see the Corinthian columns and the archways and the pool and the statues. And it is not particularly functional. It's really about decoration, and it's about beauty, and it's about a show of wealth and power. And when I see something like this, it kind of reminds me of the early days of Hollywood, or the Gilded Age, which was the late 19th century. The early days of Hollywood were the first few decades of the 20th century. And so a lot of these people that all of a sudden made a lot of money, they went and copied a lot of things like the Canopus and the Serapeum of Hadrian's Villa, and they would have Roman statues of nudes and warriors and stuff. And so anyway, it's the kind of thing that is ostentatious, meant to be, and it doesn't have all of those rules that accompanied Greek architecture and Greek sculpture. And so, model of an insula, and that is a complex of buildings right here. There's no like real guiding principle here. You see, this is kind of quasi Greek Roman columns, but the rest of it isn't, almost like modern day architecture, walls, some ornamentation, little semicircles, triangular false pediments above parts of it. And it kind of looks like ancient Greek and Republican Roman art and architecture, but it starts to just break rules. I mean, they're not tied to that so much. Ceiling and mural paintings inside the vault. I kept this slide in here too. Frigidarium, baths of Diocletian in Rome. And I put this in because this was done just at the end, right before Constantine left town. And it was remodeled by this guy, Michelangelo Buonarroti, who is the Michelangelo of the famous David statue in the Sistine Chapel. And so one of the things that they did during the Renaissance was that they tried to recreate, or in some cases restore, some of these ancient buildings. And so, Roman painting. And the book describes Roman painting as having a first, second, third, and fourth style. And I'm not exactly sure I understand all of that, and I'm not exactly going to hold you to that. But I do want you to know a few pretty fundamental things. One is that the painting was right on the wall, and oftentimes they painted these borders and they painted these panels to look like building materials. So one might look like granite, the other might look like marble, the other may look like whatever. And so that was kind of what they did, was try to fool the eye regarding the architecture. And this is the second style. And the Dionysiac. Mystery freeze. They don't know what this is all about, but it is a nod to the Greeks. But there's something that I think is noteworthy here. And this is from Pompeii. But look at these faces here. This guy, that guy peeking his head through the wall, this person. There's something quite different about this style. And that is that these people are not painted in profile. Actually got some looking quite full frontal, some just barely casting their gaze off to the side. And so this tells a story in the same way. We're not exactly sure what it was all about. And this is what I was talking about. See this corner right here? That goes straight up. However, this is painted to look as though there is a ledge here. You see that? That's what this guy is sitting on. And all of these characters are perched on this ledge. But it really isn't a ledge. And that is, and again, trying to make the illusion that the wall is not really there, or it isn't the way that it seems. Here's another good example of that. This is set up so it looks as though that this object is here in front, and then there's a small wall, another piece, and then almost outside the window is what you might call a portico or something. And you see these columns on the side, and they go back in space, and it looks like this is a huge space, but it's not. It's all flat. It's all on the wall. And so this is what they were doing, and it's really quite a leap forward. We don't know so much what ancient Greek painting looked like. We have some examples of Minoan painting. We got examples of Egyptian painting. And Egyptian painting was very stylized. It was very symbolic. The people are always portrayed in profile, and they had their own systems for showing you if you had, say, seven guys out in a field tilling the field, they would stack them one slightly in front of the other and decreasing in size. That meant that they were far away, but it did not look natural. But it was symbolic, and it was important that you were able to count the seven guys. And it was important that by their hairdo, by their clothing, by the tools they carried, that you understood their place in the society. And so anyway, this is this is like nothing before. And here you go, another thing with this painted illusion of a ledge here. And then there's a wall, there's a little bit of flat space, then a wall, and then behind it, more of the garden. And then in the background, the mountains. I think personally, this is quite remarkable. I'm not sure how natural it looks. It's kind of symbolic. The trees look like symbols of trees more than real trees. You would never mistake this for a photograph, but those mountains in the background look bluish. And that was something that, of all people, Leonardo da Vinci rediscovered in the late 15th, early 16th century. He talked about how when mountains or objects were far away, the air between the viewer and the object would be bluer, proportionate to the distance. And so if the mountains were farther away, they would be bluer and less distinct. If they were up close, they wouldn't seem to be blue at all. And he called that the perspective of transposed air or transposed atmosphere. And then it got shortened to atmospheric perspective and all of this stuff that they rediscovered in Renaissance becomes part of the art terminology and concepts we still use today. I have this here too. This is more about the architecture and the painting of that there would be doors and spaces. And this, I put a star on this one, partly because it has about everything. It has the decoration, it has the actual inlay around the edge. Of course, most of it's gone, but it looks as though these were seashells or something around, or pebbles around the perimeter to frame this. But these figures occupy a space that's deeper than the surface, and the columns come forward, all of this worked out. And this is truly where we're at. And again, the figures, you're seeing them frontal and you're seeing them mostly as like portraits rather than profile. And so some more of these kinds of paintings that they found. Some of these are from Herculaneum, some of them from Pompeii, sister cities, and undergoing archaeological digs. And I brought this, crazy but true. How many of you guys recognize this? This is downtown. It's the Sheraton.
Yep.
Yeah. And like if you go like right across the street there, you got the Scott Trade Center where the Blues play. But at any rate, I noticed, I was looking at this the other day, and it's actually, it needs some work. It's starting to deteriorate. These photos are from when it was basically new. But this guy, Richard Haas, he's doing pretty much the same thing that the ancient Romans did. Here is the Edison Brothers Stores distribution center. And it's right there. It's by Highway 40. There's the westbound. There's the eastbound. There they are again in color. And this was just a big warehouse. Edison Brothers Stores, that they sold electronics. And so they would sell like radios and toasters and electric fans and stuff like that. And so anyway, that was abandoned, and this was converted into a hotel. But these are all paintings on the side of the building, but this building is black, just like you can see right here. And so he's painted these archways, painted, in this case, obelisks on either side, statues, a column, globe, St. Louis, and so on. So this is right out of Roman painting. It's just done on a grand scale, but and this guy did a lot of buildings, by the way, all over the country, and they're really cool. And he didn't invent this. He borrowed quite heavily from the ancients. That's okay. We all do to some extent. Even when we speak, we are using words that often originate in Old Greek or Roman, Latin terms. Anyway, bottom line. And so these are, this looks like a wallpaper with paintings hanging on and stuff. Portrait of Terentius Neo, and we don't know that for sure, and his wife. And again, they're looking at you. And this is where I'll bring up this point, is that the Greeks were, for the most part, until the late Hellenistic period, but for centuries, the Greeks were so much into the ideal. The ideal was what everyone strove for, and what the Romans did was not so much about the ideal, but the real. And I put a star by this one too, partly because this is a very nice painting, to be sure. And it's a painting of a woman holding a stylus, a writing instrument, and a tablet. And so anyway, she is, looks like a woman of means of some, got this golden hairnet kind of ornamentation, earrings, nice clothes, so on, hairstyle. But we don't even know who she is. She's not a queen. She's not a pharaoh. And that's another part of this realism. And that really comes out of the Etruscan culture. And when we get into, shortly, Roman sculpture, you can see that coming through. Still life with peaches. I personally like this quite a lot. Again, it's this illusion of space. There's a plane here, it goes up, and then another plane. So it looks like it has deep space. But this is a fresco. And you guys remember what a fresco is? It's painting on wet plaster.
Yeah.
And so to do something as delicate as the shine and the lines that describe this glass jar that's half full of water, that is really extremely skillful for a fresco. And so it's not that big either, 1 feet, 2 inches, 14 inches by 13.5 inches. So it's really quite tiny, and there's an immense amount of detail here. So just to show you, this is Roman painting. And so that brings us to Roman sculpture. And again, I want to plant that idea about the real versus the ideal. And so funeral relief with portraits of the Jessii. And when they have that II, that usually means plural, and it's quite possible that these are family members and probably a father and two sons or something. But it is a funeral relief. And again, this is not an emperor. This is like a regular person. And we saw the Etruscan sarcophagus with the sculptures in terracotta on top of the casket. And so anyway, this is a regular people. And another one, this is from just before the time of the Caesars, 50 to 30 BCE, which is the Republican era, when Rome was governed by its citizens. But this is a Republican priest, and this is like light years from ideal. I want to see those Greek sculptures with ideal bodies and ideal faces, and they're almost all young. And during the Hellenistic period, they started putting beards and other indicators that someone was old, but on an ideal body. Think Laocoon and Sons. He was an old priest. And so he's got a long beard, but he's like Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime. He is still, his body is not that of an old man, because the Greeks were wedded to the idea of the ideal. And so this one, it's an ideal body, but again, kind of an ordinary face. And this is a Roman general. Again, head of Pompey the Great, Roman emperor. Not ideal, real. And that comes out of the Hellenistic time. I just told you about Laocoon. How about the woman with the shopping bag from the Hellenistic Greek period? It's more real. Denarius with portrait of Julius Caesar. This is talking about things that kind of survived the centuries. A lot of countries, especially in the Middle East, still call their currency a dinar. And this is a denarius. They had a Julius Caesar. So they had money. Roman man with portrait bust of his ancestors. And so he's an old guy. He looks like an old guy. He's got these two busts. The idea of honoring your ancestors, even if they're not these great generals, great soldiers, great emperors, great statesmen, great poets, great artists. No, this is an Etruscan heritage that survives through the Roman Empire years. And so this idea of honoring the dead and honoring your ancestors. Funerary relief with the cortege of the deceased. And so, check this out. This is the funerary parade And up here, and this is how I'm reading this, I think this is true. I think this is the casket up here, and this is just like we saw in Etruscan art, the figure of the deceased on top of the casket that holds the remains of this person. And sometimes, as we saw, couples were buried together and you'd have two people on top of this. And so a sarcophagus. Portrait of Augustus as Imperator General. And so Augustus, this is kind of leaning back more towards the Greek ideal. And so what I was saying about the real still exists, but there are times when they revert back. And especially if you're doing Emperor Augustus. And so it's a marble copy of a bronze statue. This was the guy who was the emperor of Rome at the time of Jesus' crucifixion, by the way. So, and they could do beauty. And so this should have been, actually, I overlooked this. This should have been, I got a bunch of slides at the end of this presentation about art from other places in the Roman Empire. And this is from Egypt. And it is Roman, and it is distinctly Roman. And it's beautiful, but it's also real. And so, Arapatius Auguste, altar of the Augustinian peace. And so that's what we were talking about the other day, the idea of a Pax Romana, the idea that the Roman Empire was so strong and controlled everything that we had peace for a long time. Procession of the imperial family. This is all from this. And celebrating peace is probably as good as celebrating war. A portrait of Vespasian, again, broke the nose off. But again, you see the furrowed brow, the wrinkles in the face, again, real over the ideal. A Flavian woman, Flavian was an emperor, and so this is like the time period. Got some hair. I'm going to run through. This is from the Arch of Titus that we saw just a little while ago, and it is the spoils of Jerusalem. And Titus, this was after Augustus, they had a rebellion in Judea. Judeans were tired of the Roman rule, and so Titus, in his many victories, he took his army there and he crushed the rebellion. And as tribute, he took back a lot of stuff. And one of the things you'll find in these reliefs when you're talking about the spoils of war is this. This is a menorah. It's a Jewish candle holder. It's and it's likely made of gold, which is why they would steal something like that. Funerary relief of an official in the Circus Maximus. I showed you that place the other day where they had chariot races, and we think this is the guy. He's the official. but he's not like the emperor or anything. And here's the charioteers, and here is a young person on a small horse. You know, they would have regular horse races too, by the way. But the idea of you would put this on someone's sarcophagus, you would let future generations know who this person was, even if you didn't give a name. You would honor their position and what they did. And that Trajan column, here's some detail on those spirals. And it's a lot of things here too. And up here you see a naval battle, and it looks like they are, it's a naval battle where the troops will come ashore and fight these guys and stuff. Anyway, the battle and its aftermath. Look at this guy. What's he doing? He's holding somebody's head. Gruesome. And they have another one, the wounded Romans. And you can see it's what happens. And the way they fought in those days with spears and swords wasn't gunshot wounds, you know, severed limbs and so on. But at any rate, and right here would be something of a standard, by the way. When we talk about the standard of and these are things that show everyone where these soldiers are and who they are, because there is something called, honestly, the fog of war. And so that's having flags and standards and identifying who is who, very important part of warfare. And constructing a fort is what you do when you conquer a place. Happened with the United States. The country moved westward. They sent their cavalry out to vanquish the native people. And what would they do? They would build a fort. Fort Dodge, Fort Sill, Fort Smith, Arkansas, so on. And this is from the Arch of Constantine. This is up on top. And so boar hunt and sacrifice to Apollo, which, as you see, this is 312, 315. That's the old religion. That's not Christianity. And so a bust of Hadrian. Here's another funerary relief of a vegetable vendor. This is a guy that had a shop on the town square in the market, and there's his basket of potatoes and cauliflower or something, whatever, selling stalks of wheat and so on. A regular person gets this kind of treatment. This is an interesting thing too. When we're talking about breaking rules, the apotheosis of Antoninus, Pius and Faustina. And it's the rear of the pedestal of the column of Antoninus Pius. And you see this side here is kind of more orderly, and it's kind of doesn't, you know, we got this god flying, this winged god, but these people are kind of realistic. Then we see the other side, and this is like so radically different. This does not conform to gravity. This is comparable to the kinds of differences we saw in Greek vase painting, where we would have some orderly storytelling, and then we would have these kind of more random compositions. Statue of Marcus Aurelius, bronze. I was talking about the real versus the ideal. This is kind of off the charts. Marcus Aurelius is way too big for this horse. If he were the right size for such a horse that would carry him, the stirrups would be about right there. And he would be much, much smaller compared to this horse. But at any rate, exaggeration for effect to show that Marcus Aurelius was truly a big person. More of this Roman realism and the portrait of Constantine. And it is basically what we'll end up on today. I had this one Constantine distributing large S in the Arch of Constantine, which we saw. It's the big, most elaborate arch. Anybody know what large S is?
Large S.
Large S, Largesse.
Is it a material?
No, well, it's kind of, but it's basically wealth.
Oh.
Wealth given away free. So, largesse, people don't use that word very much anymore, except in politics. And when, say, Congress gives corporate America large tax breaks, they call that largesse because it's a giveaway of a lot of money. And so anyway, any questions?
No.
No, good. Don't forget to pick your partner, pick your subject. First come, first serve. We're going to get this rolling. And so with that, I'll see you guys Wednesday.
See ya.
Yeah, be safe.